Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. Phil Perry's going to join in just a second, but what we're going to try and delve into today is what's been ailing the Patriots offense through the first 9 games. How well have they been able to pivot from the style that they used to the one that they wanted to implement? And how should they proceed after the bye? What is their identity? Phil Perry did an outstanding job. You can find his story on NBCSportsBoston.com, looking at some of the numbers that revolve around the Patriots' running game. And he asked Bill Belichick this week about what the Patriots' identity was, and can you pivot in just a 1-week span? It's brought to you by Shaw's. They're perfecting the art of fresh. Bill, let's hear from you.
Bill, going into the bye week, is it realistic to make substantial changes to what you guys are doing from a schematic standpoint, or do you have what you have, basically going back to the things you worked on in training camp, and kind of that's what you're going to?
Yeah, I mean, there's no laws or regulations. You can do whatever you want to do.
But realistically, is it asking too much?
Depends on what you want to do. I don't know. I think they would depend on what you consider major and what you don't consider major. You know, I don't know. And each team's different. Players are different. Systems are different. What works for one might not work for another, vice versa. It's like anything else. You take the time you have and try to use it as productively as possible. I'm sure that's what you do in your life. That's what we all try to do in our lives. That's what your team tries to do. Take the time, figure it out, see what the problems are, address them. Got to make a big change, make a big change. You make a little change, make a little change. I don't know. Just try to figure it out and do the best thing you can for the team. I don't know what else to do.
All right, so we're going to get into Phil's 3-point plan for fixing the offense. It's good stuff. He's not just throwing it up against the wall, I'm telling you. Stuff makes sense. There's good numbers behind it, and don't be stunned in the least if the Patriots offense looks significantly different coming out of the bye with different points that they stress. So here comes Phil, and on the back half of this pod, well, I'll tell you later. I'll tell you in a minute what we got at the end. Phil, great job probing. Appreciated that. It's really where this season hangs in the balance. It's an unsustainable offense as it stands, but the question is, are you so far down the road with it that you're just tweaking, or do you pivot? It's really a conundrum for the Patriots.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think they can completely overhaul the offense and take what they've been doing starting in the summer and say, we're going to go and become what the Arizona Cardinals are, just to pick up a random team. I don't think you can do that. But I do think you can tweak, as you mentioned, and still have those tweaks end up looking relatively significant. Meaning, if you just take some of what you do and do relatively well already and make it more of a foundational piece to your offense, that to me would represent a significant change, but still not be, again, a complete and utter overhaul of everything that you've tried to do starting over the course of the summer. I think there's some stuff that they should bail on, and I think that Bill Belichick would be willing to bail on, Tom. It's just what's interesting to me is I think it is a similar year to 2018 in some ways. Obviously, the personnel is much different, but I don't know if they have all the pieces available to them to be able to execute that kind of change they made that year.
Yeah, and you bring up 2018. Think about that, Phil. The encyclopedic knowledge and reference points that Brady and McDaniels had, their ability to go back in time and say, let's just do what we did in 2014. Let's just do what we did in 2016. That was the great advantage of having the continuity that the Patriots had. Now they don't have any continuity at either quarterback or play caller. There is no titled coordinator. So it's hard to even imagine, not just the Patriots, but few teams in the NFL being able to pivot.
I think that's true, but I also look at what happened that year where they became a 2-back offense and they used a lot of James Devlin and they became a much more downhill running team with rookie Sony Michel. And they rode that at the end of the regular season. And then they used it a little bit in the postseason leading up to the Super Bowl. And then, of course, in that Super Bowl, it was such a ground and pound game on both sides and such a defensive struggle on both sides that it ended up helping them to be the toughest team on the field that day. But I look at that season, and that stuff, Tom, that they went to was probably stuff that they had used right earlier in the year. It just wasn't their identity. It wasn't their core stuff,
Right.
quote unquote. So can they do that this year with stuff that maybe wasn't their core stuff in training camp, but that they've gone through now 9 games and they look at it and they say, you know what? That should be our core stuff because we're pretty good at X, Y, and Z. Let's leave A, B, and C behind, or let's just sprinkle it in here and there, and let's be a different team than we thought we were going to be to start the year.
They have such a mishmash of personnel now, too. It's as if some of the decisions they made in the offseason, jettison your fullback, Jakob Johnson, try to feature, obviously, an indication of how much they want to feature Jonnu Smith is the price tag involving him. So if they want to go back to, but they have a running back, 2 running backs who are absolute beasts, not what we would think of as, quick scat type guys. So they have downhill running capabilities, but they've jettisoned the fullback that was kind of a byproduct of it. So to me, not only is the offense not coordinated, the roster is not coordinated at the moment for what they are wanting to do or might be forced to do.
Well, right. It's almost as though they pigeonholed themselves before the season began. And they had just made the decision. We're going to be a zone running team. And you talk to players before the season started, during training camp. That was really one of the biggest changes in what is a different offense. And Mac Jones reminded us of that again this week when I asked him about the timing in the passing game, how much different this year versus last year. And he said, again, 2 different offenses. But that was one of the big changes was they began running many more zone runs. That means outside and inside zone types of runs. So I think people think often of the wide zone stuff when they think of zone running, and they think of Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan before him. Well, inside zone is a big part of what the Patriots do and has been really all year. Now, they haven't been very good at it. So can they get away from that, Tom? Can they throw one of those tight ends that they're so hungry to use and get more out of? Can they throw Jonnu Smith in the backfield and almost use him like a fullback to get more downhill the way they could with Jakob Johnson? I'm not sure you can. They're just 2 different players. They're 2 different styles of athlete. And so I think that's probably one thing that they're trying to look at during the bye is how can we leverage both our personnel and what we do well to help us be a more efficient offense in the second half?
Because as we sit week in and week out and talk about the tweaks that they can make, and I want to get into some of the things you found in your plan for the Patriots to change things, but you're 9 games in and quarterback's got 5 touchdown passes and 7 picks, and the receivers, the majority of them are not on pace to break 40 receptions for the year. And as I pointed out before, it's $25 million worth of investment. There's no way to escape how little you're getting, how little bang for your buck you're getting as the owner of the New England Patriots and as the general manager, Bill Belichick, of the New England Patriots. So you can't escape that this value-laden team is probably exercising the worst values in the NFL right now. What did you find when you looked at some of the tendencies and went into the numbers on what they've been doing with the zone run stuff? Because this was great.
Yeah, so the bye week gives us some time to dig into the numbers a little bit, Tom. And the thing that stood out to me, first and foremost, was just looking at how they run the ball, because I think people view this as a running offense and a run-first type of team, yet they're near the bottom of the league in terms of yards per carry. They're just not that efficient running the football, and thank God for them that Ramondre Stevenson is as good as he is, because if he weren't so good at breaking tackles, they definitely would be even further down that list in terms of their league ranking. But the scheme part of it and what they're actually good at stood out to me. Sports Info Solutions says that the Patriots are among the league leaders in zone run usage. So their number of attempts, both inside and outside zone. And yet they're 27th in the league in yards per carry on zone runs, just 3.5 yards per carry on inside and outside zone runs through 9 weeks. Now, what could they do to pivot? Things that they've done this year already. They just haven't done quite as much of them as they could. Use more gap runs, pull your guards more often, more counter plays, more wham plays, more duo plays where you get those double teams at the line of scrimmage and you work your way up to the second level. On those types of gap runs, they average 6.1 yards per carry. That is first in the league. I think we've all been looking for, okay, what is this offense actually good at relative to the rest of football? That's it. They should be a gap run team. That should be a core part of their offensive identity. And I'm imagining, Tom, that they'll figure out a way to use those types of plays more frequently because they're just so much more efficient when they call those.
You know what's funny? Not only did they pivot in 2018 to being a more between the tackles, straight ahead running team, they kind of did the same thing in 2021, where they said, okay, you know what? We've been trying to run wide early in the season here. Let's get more in between the tackles. And it was borne out by the production of Damian Harris. So this will be the third time in 5 years that they've had to say, yeah, we're not good at running wide. Let's run up the middle. I mean, light dawns on Marblehead at some point. Oh, I'm smarter than Bill Belichick now? No. But sometimes I just think they want to be stuff that they're not. Phil, any other cures for the Patriots? Should they run some more RPO, which Mac really loves, and we see team after team after team across the league profiting from it?
No question. In my opinion, they should. Now, have they been incredibly efficient, incredibly effective when they've called RPOs over the last few weeks? No, not necessarily, but that doesn't mean they should stray away from them. I think when you look at the most efficient offenses in football, you just mentioned, whether it's Jalen Hurts at the Eagles, Tua Tagovailoa with the Dolphins, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, these guys are all among the league's most frequent users of RPOs. Some of them are great quarterbacks. Some of them are quarterbacks who could use a little help. They could use some cheap yardage. I think of Tua Tagovailoa first and foremost. But those types of throws really fit his skill set well, and he's able to pull the trigger quickly, make good decisions, take care of the football. He doesn't have to be this incredibly strong-armed or incredibly burly quarterback. He can just be a distributor, be a point guard, and I think that fits Mac Jones's game too. It's not just because he did it in college. He has a skill set that should allow him to execute those throws at the pro level. I think embracing the college game in general, Tom, whether it's RPOs or more no huddle, would be beneficial to the Patriots. This year in 35 pass attempts out of the no huddle, the Patriots averaging over 8 yards per attempt, and they haven't been sacked. And that to me is the stat. That 0 in the sack column when they go no huddle means a lot because they could use as much help as they could get for their offensive line. So again, according to Sports Info Solutions, they do a better job protecting the quarterback when they go no huddle. Feels like Mac Jones is comfortable in those spots as well.
Let's hear from David Andrews. He spoke Wednesday with us about what he thinks the simple cure is for the Patriots' offensive ills.
Never called a game before, but it's hard to call a game when it's 2nd and 5, and next thing you know, it's 3rd and 12. So, or 2nd and 5 to 2nd and 11, something like that. So, that's a big thing. We got to stop hurting ourselves. When we put together complete games and do the right things, stay ahead on tracks, cut down the penalties. That's the recipe for football no matter what. So we got to do a better job of that. And, it was what it was the last 8-9 weeks, whatever. We've got a clean slate. Everyone in the league's got a clean slate coming off the bye. So, these last 8-9 weeks, whatever it is, we can determine what it is or what it looks like.
Oh, that it were that easy. Just no more penalties. Hey, guys, stop committing penalties. Okay. And then the team's back just plowing forward down the field. I don't know if it's that simple.
Doesn't it seem more simple than completely changing the offense, though? And I know some of the suggestions that I've made and that others have made isn't necessarily an overhaul of the offense, but if you just are able to hammer it home, guys, listen to the snap count. Understand what the snap count is when you're leaving the huddle. Don't align illegally. Let's not have 12 guys on the field. Like, these are things that should be quick and easy cleanups. And you would think for a coaching staff led by Bill Belichick that they are quick and easy. Maybe it has a domino effect in a positive fashion on the Patriots offense. You're in 2nd and medium, you're in 3rd and short as opposed to 3rd and long. All of a sudden, again, you're taking the pressure off your offensive line. You're allowing Mac Jones to feel more comfortable in the pocket. You can be less predictable across all downs because you're staying ahead of the change. You're staying on schedule. So that is the first and most easy cleanup, in my opinion, is if you can, obviously turnovers is in there too, but if you can get rid of the turnovers, you can reduce the penalties, you should be on your way to a more efficient offense.
I think this is a great matchup Sunday against the Jets to really give a sense of what the Patriots want to be in the second half, because they just played the Jets a couple of weeks ago. They were inept in terms of pass protecting. Didn't really have a good offensive game at all, given the field position that they had and the number of times they settled for field goals. David Andrews will return. They'll go up against a Jets team that they struggled with offensively. What will they do differently? And how will they do against a Jets team, I'm sure, that's coming in and saying, we could have handled these guys. All we had to do was not kill ourselves. So you have two teams who are going to come in with their quarterbacks in a straitjacket to not kill themselves. And how do you see this one playing out?
I think it's going to be relatively low scoring. I think Zach Wilson is going to do a better job taking care of the ball. Now, are Gerard Mayo and Steve Belichick and Bill Belichick able to confuse Zach Wilson into making some bad decisions? I think he's going to be so focused on not putting the ball into harm's way that it will end up being beneficial for the Jets, but it might be a more low-scoring game. Maybe you don't get some of those 50, 60-yard completions that they had against the Patriots a few weeks ago because he just is so desperate to take care of the football. So I think it'll be low scoring. I think the Patriots will try to change a little bit, but they'll still have a hard time moving the ball because that defense is just so talented. I mean, they can create all kinds of pressure with just 4 rushers. Bill Belichick told me earlier this week, he said they might use more defensive linemen than any team in the NFL, and they're all good. They have 2 great corners on the outside in DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. I think maybe the most underrated corner tandem in football, even though Sauce gets a lot of credit, gets a lot of hype because of the draft position and the name. They're just as good almost on the opposite side of the field. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to throw it this week. I think it's low scoring, but I do think the Patriots end up winning this one, Tom.
I love this matchup for the reasons expressed and just the import of it for the rest of the season. In the AFC East, the Patriots in 4th place, the Jets unlikely in 2nd place, but they are. All right, Phil, let's put a cork in this. I got to talk to JT the Brick.
Love it.
All right, for a couple of decades, you've heard this guy. It's JT the Brick. He's on Boston radio all the time with his national gig, but he's also a Raiders pre- and post-game host. He's been doing that for almost 2.5 decades. Sits down every week with our guy, Josh McDaniels. And JT, I feel like I sold you a bill of goods. I told you things were going to be great when Josh got out there. It's not so good so far.
Yeah, Tom, it's tough sledding. The Raiders are at 2-7, and Coach McDaniels here is just trying to get this team on track here. There's a lot happening right now. New coach, new GM, who I really support, and Dave Ziegler too, and they're trying to roster deconstruct while winning, and they've lost 6 games by 1 possession. And let me start off with that and what that means, because you've been in football a long time. Those are 6 games where the Raiders had the lead or had the ball to tie the game or win the game. Good example was this Indianapolis game. They were completely outplayed by Indy. Indy was the better team. Raiders have the ball, under a minute to go, 2 shots at the end zone. Foster Moreau, it hits him. It gets broken up, should have caught it to win the game. Devontae going up against Gilmore on that play. So that was a game they should have won. Then you go back to the Kansas City game. They were up by 17. Throw that one out, Tom. That's a throw-out statistic. They could have been up by 24. Throw that out. But the Arizona-Kyler Murray game, where they were up by 17 in the 4th quarter, and he ran around like a toddler at a party who stole someone's phone, right? And they couldn't put a body on him. Not only did he score 2 touchdowns, he converted on 2 two-point conversions. So give the Raiders that win for the conversation, and then, give them the other win where they had a 17-point lead. You start adding this up, and you say to yourself, and then you throw in the Jacksonville game, which is mind-blowing. So the Raiders should roughly have 5 wins. Take another one away, they have 4, and they're 4-5 going into Denver to be 5-5. So I think it's a lot of bad luck. It's a lot of bad execution, and it's a team that's just trying to find their way with a new head coach.
The nut punch to all of that is, though, they were so clutch last year, especially at the end after John Gruden was relieved. So I look at this and I look, okay, Josh has a bedside manner that you might need to get used to as a player. He can be excitable. Bisaccia, they had obviously warmed to him. Why are they performing worse in crunch time under what I presume is a smarter offensive coach than Bisaccia was? No disrespect. What's the disconnect? Why are they gagging?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, these close games, if you don't win, you gag. And if you win, you come from behind, you're a hero there. So it's a very fair question. First, let's get to Coach Bisaccia. Last year, they had to win the final 4 games to get into the playoffs. They had no reason to beat Cleveland. They played poorly. Cleveland played worse. They got a break and won that game. You saw the Charger game at the end of the year. It's on the Mount Rushmore of the greatest games ever in regular season NFL history because it involved the Steelers with the result. It knocked the Chargers out of the playoffs and put the Raiders in. Got to give Bisaccia credit. Then they had first and goal at the 9 against Cincinnati in the first round of the playoffs. First and goal at the 9 and lost that game. The question is, Mark Davis went after John Gruden when he had Jack Del Rio because he wanted John. And he really loved John, loved him as a person and a coach. Then we know what happened, unfortunately, to John Gruden. I won't condone the emails, but he had this organization set up going forward. And it was tricky with Mike Mayock, who you know. You know Mike. Yeah. And that was tough sledding. A lot of these first-round picks, Tom, you've seen them, are disasters. Disasters. So they didn't go with Bisaccia because they brought in a general manager-coach combo that Mark was really confident in and is still very confident in.
Yeah.
Unwavering support. So to answer the question on Rich Bisaccia, they wanted to go in a different direction and have a play caller, an offensive mind who had all the success out of New England to build that culture here in Vegas.
On paper, it makes tremendous sense.
Yeah,
I mean, if you put that on an 8.5 by 11 white sheet of paper, it makes genius sense. I consider Josh, and I've said it before, one of the 5 best coaches in the league. And I'm including the head coaches.
Yeah.
And so far, it hasn't shown up. Is there a resistance on the part of the players? Is there a little bit of locker room dysfunction in terms of embracing Josh? You know, we saw Blake Martinez retirement. We heard allusions by Derek Carr this week about effort levels. I watched that Saints game and I was like, what are these guys on defense doing? They're not trying. So where is that?
Good question. I don't think there's locker room dissent because he has the leaders like Max Crosby, Devontae Adams. Look, this question's on play calling. Devontae wants every ball, which is great. He literally wants every ball. And you covered Randy Moss and Gronk. They want every ball, and that's okay with Devontae. Derek broke down emotionally, I think in a positive way, to show how much he loves this team. And he's all in on Josh McDaniels. As you know, he said something very interesting, Tom, in that breakdown. He said, you know, Josh has had more success than Derek could ever see. Derek gets that, you know, Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels comes from the Belichick tree and all that winning. You know from covering the team, and I've covered the team, that every week for almost 19 years, there was a victory. There wasn't disarray in the Boston Globe, EEI, the Sports Hub. No one's freaking out about what's happening because everybody's winning. So Derek understood that culture was coming here. The locker room right now, there's some guys chirping. There are. You know, Devontae said some things. Derek obviously pointing and trying to figure out who. But Josh McDaniels seems to have this team on track. They're just not executing. And with our conversation here, Tom, it comes down to this. Are you prepared or are you not prepared? I think they're more than prepared. And you know this. Josh is prepared. He's a stickler to details. That's all he does is details. And they're looking at details all around the clock. The problem is what's happening with the execution. And they're not executing. They're not running perfect routes. The offensive line's a rebuild, and the defense is really struggling. I mean, they don't have players on defense other than Max Crosby. Chandler Jones hasn't worked out yet. And they're going to blow up a lot of these players on defense, let them go, and try to rebuild that side of the ball.
That's what's really fascinating. The 5-11 season that the Patriots went through in 2000, Bill Belichick came in after Pete Carroll. That team never bottomed out either. It was an 8-8 team in Carroll's last year. Team went 5-11 in 2000. Belichick had a massive salary cap issue to deal with. They actually began, I might be lying or exaggerating, with 48 players on the active roster at the beginning of the season, because they just fumigated the place. So the rebuild existed then. Bill went through that place, you know, just culling players left and right. So it was, and even 2000 consisted very much of a resistance to Bill and the way he did things, and the way he talked, and the way he didn't talk, and the eye contact that didn't exist, and the militaristic eccentricities of him.
Yeah.
So players had to adjust to it. But by the 2001 season, he had jettisoned his Bruce Armstrongs and his Ben Coates and his Max Lanes and players that just were ambivalent about whether or not Bill would work out. So maybe it is a year away, but the scrutiny is different now than it was on the New England Patriots in 2000. No one gave a crap about the New England Patriots in 2000 to a large extent, except for 30,000 fans out here in New England who still did. The Raiders are a national brand. They'll never go away from anybody's mind. So the scrutiny on Josh is tough. How's he holding up?
I think he's holding up well. And again, I'm the only guy who sits down with him every week and talks to him. And it's basically a preview of the upcoming opponent. And let me tell you this, I've been doing this a long time. He's the best I've ever seen. And Gruden was damn good, as you know, because Gruden's a TV guy. Josh knows the opponent better than any coach I've ever sat down with. I can go starting safety to Mike linebacker, and he'll tell you their stats, how they played the last 2 weeks. He is phenomenal at preparing and looking ahead. And again, when it's easy to do an interview when you're winning. It's tougher when you're losing here. And he's a pro, and he shows up there. And Tom, you know Josh, and we talked about this at the Super Bowl, and I never met him until now. And I look at the human being factor, which it's tough on the radio, right? Raider fans are really hard. Mm-hmm. They were hard on him when they got the job because of the Patriot connection. And some of the fans were just juvenile about it. Give me a break. So Belichick goes from Cleveland, right? When he gets to New England, does everybody say, well, he was with the Browns? No. Well, a lot of Raider fans didn't like Josh coming in because he was part of New England, the Tuck rule if you go back.
Sure.
And Raider fans didn't give him the greatest welcome in the world. But I talked to him about his son who's playing high school football. That's the first thing we talk about this week. How's your son doing? Oh, he had a great game. He wears his son's sweatshirt of his school, right? He asked about my family. We talk and just have a 3 to 4 minute conversation as he's getting mic'd up. And then we talk and I wish him luck afterwards. And he couldn't be a better guy. But, the fans aren't going to see that all behind the scenes. They're not at home with him. They don't know him here. John Gruden was a really big personality back in the day. So I think that Josh McDaniels is working his ass off to try to turn this around. But as you know, there's more to this with Dave Ziegler. They're trying to build something up to a level that hasn't been here. And the level would be to get it to where the Chiefs are, where every year you go, okay, Andy Reid's going to have them in the playoffs. Are they going to win the division or, God forbid, be a wild card? The Raiders weren't there with Rich Bisaccia, even though they got to the playoffs. They weren't there with Coach Gruden, who tried and got close, and they're trying to do it now with the new regime that has scouts, people behind the scenes. And Mark Davis came out this week and said Rome wasn't built in a day. Mark Davis said things, his unwavering support, cover of the newspaper here locally. And as you know, Tom, you know the numbers better than anybody I know. They paid him a lot of money. Mm-hmm. The GM's getting paid well. They're hardworking guys. They have a different grading system when they grade players. And Mark Davis understands this, man. They just started. It's 7, 8, now 9 games.
Yeah.
And they're trying to put a plan in place, and it's really rough because these games, these losses have been brutal. I'm there in the stadium with Raider Nation. I'm with the team, and you're looking up going, all right, we got this one. And then it slips away, and you go, wait a second, what just happened?
And it's the quality of competition, too. I mean, it'd be one thing if you're getting bounced around by, whatever, the Ravens or,
sure,
or upper tier. I mean, you're getting squished by Jacksonville. Your hopes are dashed by the Saints. And it's like, and then Jeff Saturday and the Colts, it's indignity after indignity. So, I mean, I say the same thing with Mac Jones this year, JT. Well, at least by the end of the year, you'll know he's built up some resiliency.
Yeah.
So, last question. As much as people poke fun at the Mark Davis haircut, I think he's extremely underrated and underappreciated as a pretty shrewd guy who's got his stuff in a row. In a way that a lot of other owners don't. I mean, he knows when to step in, he knows when to step back. And when he gets in front of the mic, I like listening to him. Mm-hmm. Would he ever pull his vote of confidence if it really got crappy?
I don't know the answer to that. I know Mark really well. I knew Mark before he was the owner of the team. I knew Mark way before this all happened. And I had a front row seat to Mark Davis's vision of what was happening in Oakland and the politics. And Tom, it was so tough in Oakland to compete against the A's and that stadium and the mayor and the politicians there. I saw Mark at his lowest point as the Raiders lost Carson, California. Remember the Chargers and the Raiders were going to Carson. Jerry Jones flipped it all and got Stan Kroenke in there, which turned out to be the blessing for the Raiders. Raiders went up to Oakland. Mark wasn't used to coming in third place. And then all of a sudden, this jewel in the desert opens up. Top 5 in revenue. the best stadium, I believe, the best stadium experience in football. But Mark wants to win more than any concert that's in there, any halftime entertainment. He lives and dies with this team. He has the toughest legacy in sports because you could never be Mr. Davis. Mm-hmm. You could never be Al Davis, and he knows that. So he tries to hire people, put them in place, stay out of their way. Of course, he meets with the coach after every game. All the media is sitting there now with stopwatches. How long's the meeting? How long have they been there? We're waiting for our press conference. So it's 16 minutes. It's 14 minutes. Everybody's speculating about what they're talking about. Mark is very smart and shrewd, and he gets the credit for bringing this monstrosity to the rest of the NFL owners, the new revenue stream, the Super Bowl, the Pro Bowl. So you're really complimentary, and nice to say that about him because he should get the credit for that, but he wants to win. And Josh McDaniels has to win here. And it's tough sledding right now at 2-7, but the plan is to get the players who aren't going to be here off the field, get some of the younger players on to evaluate them, try to win every game, and then go into the offseason with Dave Ziegler. Here's the key. Dave Ziegler goes in with his new scouts, everyone around him, and says, we are make or break. We're going balls out. I got big free agency money. We gave up a first and second for Devontae. We don't have to give up nothing now. We probably have a high draft pick. We got to make a decision at quarterback. We got to make a decision with some of these other guys like Darren Waller going forward. Does he want to be here? I think he does. Is he going to be healthy? A lot of tough decisions. And then the Raiders hit the ground on a big, big reset because that's what's going to be demanded by the fans, the Raider Nation.
Well, it's fascinating to watch. I mean, they're not in rebuild mode yet. They're still in win now mode. I mean, you can get to 10-7. I mean, it's unusual to win 8 games in a row, but the talent level there.
Tom, let me stop you there for a second. I don't believe that because I think the Raiders are going to go win now, and I think they're going to win some games coming up. But the defense is really struggling, and there's a lot of players on that defense that will not be back. And the offense is really struggling because of no Renfro and Waller. They're on IR. They can't come back to the Rams game. So it's going to be hard for them to win. But I think they'll win a couple of games here. And everybody should just pay attention with a couple of things here. Do they get better executing? Do the players continue to have their buy-in, which I think they will? And does the noise settle down? Because the problem with these last 3 losses at New Orleans, at Jacksonville, because they went, as you know, they went from New Orleans to Sarasota, Florida for a week to do this team bonding thing. And then they had a 17-point lead on Jacksonville. So it worked. Whatever they did in Jacksonville worked. They came out 17-0. And then the next thing you know, everything that could go wrong went wrong in regards to execution. They lost that game. They came home to Jeff Saturday in a game they should have won by 14 points without Matt Ryan. They got outplayed. Now they can't go into Denver because it's a rivalry game, and they have an opportunity to sweep Denver, and they've won the last 6 out of 7 against Denver. So you're going to learn a lot about the Raiders this Sunday at Mile High.
Best 45-minute team in the league. One of the best radio hosts in the country, too. JT, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Tom. Always a pleasure. Talk to you soon.